I'd like to call the City Council meeting of January 21st, 2020 to order at this time. If everyone please stand and let's say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. As we look, we do have a quorum this evening, so we can proceed. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move one item off of the consent agenda with regards to the item for the lease at SportFit, please. Put that to new business.
Okay. And that would be item E?
Yep.
Any questions, concerns regarding it? Okay.
What's wrong with this thing? Why do I not have?
So move forward at this time. Do we have any citizen participation? Thank you so much. If you would, when your name is called, would you please come to the microphone, state your name and address? And if you can, try to limit your comments to 2 minutes. First, we have Verna Teasdale and Dustin Kuzan. Good evening.
Hey everyone, I'm Dustin Kuzan, and we're here today to give you an update on the Arts and Entertainment District and ask you for something tonight. So we might be a little more than 2 minutes. Is it going to be 2 minutes for me, 2 minutes for her? All right, so all right, well, first of all, I just want to congratulate you guys. I haven't been able to officially congratulate you, the new mayor, new council, and I've heard a lot of great things about you guys. I've heard you've been very engaged and working hard, so I'm very proud to hear that we've got a very engaged and active council now. So thank you for that. So almost a year ago, back in February of 2019, I was up here with Tamika, and we presented a kind of a new concept to the council about this Arts and Entertainment District in Old Bowie. And since then, we built a team of residents and business owners and all that, and we've started building partnerships throughout the community. Part of that team is Brava. We have the Bowie Arts Committee on our team. We have Visual Society, which is an artist group that represents the DC region, Art Alchemy, and then other local artists and interested business owners. So we've met with a lot of organizations in the community and developed partnerships with them, including the Huntington Heritage Society, let's see, Knights of St. John's, the Bowie's Lions Club, and many other organizations. We've met with local business owners, the Old Town Grill. We've even engaged with Overdue Recognition and Mike's Bike Shop up in Old Bowie and a lot of other things in Old Bowie. And then we've also met with a lot of government partners, including key staff here in the city, the Maryland Arts Council and Park and Planning Commission, and a bunch of others. So we've learned a lot, and we've developed a strategic plan, and there's a lot that needs to be done. But we've just decided that we need to focus on one thing right now. We've had some trouble trying to advance some of these things, but Verna pulled together a leadership steering committee, that's going to focus on this one event, an annual Arts and Heritage Festival that we think can kickstart this district. So I'll turn it over to Verna to let her talk about what that is.
Thank you, and I agree with Dustin. Congratulations to all of you, and it's good to see you here. As Dustin said, we have put together the first activity to start moving Old Bowie to an arts and entertainment district. And that piece is what we're calling the Arts and Heritage Festival. It's set for September 26th, that's a Saturday. The steering committee that's planning the festival consists of talented citizens. It consists of a representative from the Huntington Heritage Society and BRAVA. BRAVA is the Bowie Regional Arts Vision Association. And the committee is reaching out to include representatives from Bowie State University, from businesses and other organizations that understand the value of arts and entertainment in the lives of people. And if you know individuals who you believe would be a good member of the addition to the committee, please let us know. The committee knows that the city staff is very experienced in planning successful major events. For the Arts and Heritage Festival, or for any other of the entertainment activities, arts and entertainment activities planned for Old Bowie, we need the expertise, experience, and wisdom of the city staff. We understand that before the staff can provide us with the benefit of their knowledge, that they need permission from you. So, in addition to the update, the second reason we're here tonight is to ask for your help. And the help is, would you please grant staff the opportunity to help the steering committee as needed. The city staff can prevent missteps, can make certain that all the arts and entertainment activities meet the high standards for which Bowie is known. And additionally, when we go out to raise funds, donors are more likely to invest if they know that the city appreciates arts and entertainment and is involved. Giving city staff permission to work with us not only will assure the success of the planned activities, but also will demonstrate your support for arts and entertainment and your support for the importance of Old Town Bowie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Monica Rolla.
Hey, good evening, Mayor Adams and City Council of Bowie. I'm Monica Roebuck. I'm a 20-year resident in the city of Bowie, a teacher, a member of the City of Bowie Education Committee, and a member of the Board of Elections. I stand before you today as a concerned citizen of Bowie. I rise today to urge the City Council to keep early voting at the City of Bowie gym. Voting is a fundamental right, a constitutional right that we as citizens of the United States have. It is very important that every voice is heard during an election. The more voter participation in an election, the better. The City of Bowie Gym has been an early voting site for at least 8 years. During this time, the site has been one of the highest locations in the county with the highest turnout. In the 2018 primary and the general election, it had the highest voter turnout in the county. The Bowie Gym is a great example for an early voting site because it is centrally located and easily accessible to major roadways and public transportation. It also has adequate parking for voters and ample space inside to handle the voting equipment and accommodate large numbers of voters. It has come to my attention that the gym may no longer be an early voting site. I urge the council to reconsider this decision for several reasons. First, most of the other sites within Bowie cannot accommodate the number of voters that the gym is currently attracting, including the community center or the public library. They have fewer parking spaces and are not essentially located. Next, relocating to another venue that is not comparable could suppress the vote and ultimately lower the turnout. Third, Maryland House Bill 1179, which went into law in 2009, states that the voting sites must be published to the public 6 months prior to the primary. With roughly 90 days until the primary in April, changing the early voting sites does not allow the city or the Board of Elections time to properly notify the public of that change. With this change, many voters may not get the information in time, which may add to long lines on the actual election day. If the City of Bowie gym is that successful, why do some people want to change the location? If the problem is volunteers at the polls and a lack of parking, this can be resolved if the City of Bowie establishes expectations and rules for the volunteers. These are issues that can be resolved through communication with the candidates, their volunteers, and if necessary, the Bowie Police Department and the sheriff. In closing, this is not just an issue affecting the City of Bowie. This is a county-wide issue because during early voting, as you know, residents from across the county can vote in any early voting site. So I urge you to keep this as an early voting site in our upcoming election in April to expand voting rights and to increase voting in Prince George's County. Thank you. And I attached, these are the results from the early voting in the primary in 2018. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Amity Pope.
Good evening. My name is Amity Pope. I am my location residence, 1300 Chapelwood Lane in Capitol Heights, Maryland, and I come as a concerned resident. From much of what the last speaker just shared, I received a couple calls from my Chapel Oak community members about, and that's in Capitol Heights, about the hearings about the closing of the gymnasium. So I thought I'd compile some of their thoughts on that for consideration for this council. So for years, voters have come to that Bowie gymnasium to cast their votes, and coming from someone that is electioneered, you know, and volunteered for various candidates, some of you I'm testifying before this evening, I recall many instances when I would go to a polling place, people would rush from work to get there to realize that this isn't their place, or they could come, but they didn't know that they could come if it was early voting, to have to go to different polling sites that were actually theirs during the actual primaries. And some would just say, you know, I'm tired. I've been to 3 different places, I'm going home. And much to what the last speaker shared with getting out notification in a timely manner, this poses as a problem. So as we all know, voter suppression in the US concerns allegations, whether they're legal or illegal, that they're tactics used to prevent voters from being able to exercise their right to vote. And right now, the word out in the community, at least in the Capitol Heights area, is not good regarding the potential of that Bowie gymnasium being shut down. Some are calling it racist tactics. Others have aligned the idea of shutting the main Bowie site down as to what the ACLU refers to as gerrymandering. And redistricting, as we all know, refers to the process of redrawing lines from different public officials that are elected. And it's when those lines are drawn, they manipulate boundaries and such, and for predetermined outcomes. And many share this concern. So MGA, the Maryland General Assembly just passed same-day voting, keeping that site that people are aware of, they know that they can come to and have heard about it, would just be in the best interest of residents. So, I would hate for the city of Bowie to be known as using some sophisticated measure of voter suppression in some instance to inconveniently shutting down one of the largest voting turnout sites. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Rebecca Wilson.
Mayor Adams and council members, thank you so much for inviting public speakers tonight. I also am here, I'm a 25-year resident of the county. I live in Hyattsville. I've served as a chief election judge since 2004 in the county. And I also would like to urge you not to move the early voting site. Establishing a successful polling place takes kind of a long time for voters to get it in their minds where they're going to vote. And I have had the misfortune to be a judge at a site that had been moved since the last election. And when the voters finally found their way to the new site, they were not too happy. And of course, they unloaded on us because they didn't have anyone else to unload on, because they didn't know when they got to the polling place they'd been voting in for years where to go or how to find that out. And so I'm sure we lost some people in the transition. Some were persistent enough to figure out where they needed to be. To have a site this successful with such high turnout is really a mark of success. And you guys should be very proud to be leading the county in your early voting. The only arguments I've heard against keeping the site where it is are things like lack of parking, which I understand that the other sites have even more difficulty with more restricted parking. And that's huge. Making it convenient for voters to get in and out with a quick place to park and go in and vote and leave is huge. I've seen people circle the block several times and leave if they can't find a place to vote. Keeping order outside the polls is the responsibility of the chief election judges like me. On election day, we're supposed to be patrolling both the interior and the exterior of the polling place. If we perceive problems, if volunteers are too aggressive in their electioneering or any kind of fights are breaking out, we are empowered to do what we can to keep the peace, including calling in the police. And I've had to do that. So moving it to a new site would not resolve these problems. Better polling place management would resolve these problems. And moving from a site that has more parking to a site that has less parking is a recipe for disaster, as well as confusing the public when you change the site they're used to voting in. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Millie Hall.
Good evening,
Good evening.
and congratulations to all the council members. I haven't had a chance to congratulate you in public, so congratulations. My name is Millie Hall, and I live on Dunstable Court in Bowie. I ditto a lot of what they've said, but I'll say a little bit what I'm wanting to say. I'm stunned as to why this would even be a discussion to move the Bowie Gym polling place. This is definitely feeling a bit like voter suppression to me. Given how central the gym is within the city of our senior citizens, please let's not forget about the senior citizens again. Most of the senior citizens' apartments are near the Bowie Gym, so it makes sense to me to leave it there. I've seen firsthand how many people that the main gym accommodate, specifically with our state and federal election, and I just don't believe that there is a viable option that could reveal any other accommodation more than the Bowie Gym. The Wood Gym is local for everyone, and I think you guys should really consider this before you move it, because like the lady said, if a lot of voters lose their spots, they give up, go home. There's been times when people came to the wrong place, and it was like really the last minute, and I literally had to get in my car and take them to the proper place. That was like 10 years ago. So if you start confusing people, that's going to give them another excuse not to vote. We have been very successful. I've been out there for years volunteering, and I don't think it's nothing different from any other place, what the volunteers are doing. Actually, I've seen a lot of elected officials come out and put on t-shirts, and they're the one walking across the line. So let's really consider it before we do this. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, moving along. Presentations.
There isn't any tonight.
No presentations this evening? Okay. Can we go to the city boards and the committees appointments? Do we have any? I usually have the list. All right. So I'll call them over here. I'm good.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to appoint LaDonna King to the Education Committee.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'd also like to move to appoint James Sheckelman to the Community Recreation Committee.
It's been moved and properly second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries.
And Mr. Mayor, lastly, I'd like to move to appoint Mashia Desmond to the Education Committee as well.
It's moved and properly second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Could the three, if you are present, could you please come forward? Raise your right hand, please. I do swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland and support the Constitution and laws thereof. And that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of regular member of the according to the Constitution and laws of this state. Congratulations. Ms. King, congratulations. Please.
I'll shake your hand, but I'm recovering from the flu.
And Ms. Desmond, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
James, you can shake your hand.
And thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you for your commitment to supporting our city.
Now, please, this already works.
Are there any council announcements? No? Okay. All right.
that I wanted to share.
Mike.
Oh, sorry. I do have one that I wanted to share in regard to a question that came up at the, I believe it was the South Lake meeting and the listening session regarding the B29 bus route. I found out today that it will not be eliminated. So they are
Good.
keeping that bus route.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good news. All right, let's move to the city manager's report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I have no report tonight. Thank you, sir.
Okay. All right, let's move to the consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make an amendment to item G. It looks like we're sending this letter to Representative Hoyer, supporting the Protection Community Televisions Act. While I'm in support of it, and while we are all in support of it, I would recommend that we also send this to Congressman Anthony Brown of the 4th District, as he does also represent the city of Bowie.
So sending it to both? Yeah. I agree.
I agree with that change if we need a second on that.
Yeah. Moved and properly second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Do we have someone to move to approve the entire consent agenda with the one amendment on item G?
I make a motion to approve the entire consent agenda with the amendment to item G.
Second. It's been moved and properly second to accept the consent agenda except for item E, which was removed. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any additional old business? Okay, with the new business.
Mr. Mayor, under the Amber Ridge new business, we have a preliminary plan of subdivisions of 4-19032 and a detailed site plan, DSP 19040, that require action by the council tonight. And I'll hand it over to planning to take it from here.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Joe Meinert, the planning director. This item under new business, item A, is actually two items, and I wanted to just orient you to this. The fact that we have two things listed under the same item, it's a little unusual, but it involves the same property, but at two phases of the review process. So you have the preliminary plan, you'll need one motion for that, and then you have the detailed site plan, you'll need a separate motion for that. But for the purpose of the public hearing tonight, we've combined them, so you only need to hear from everyone once on the overall subject of development on this property. To introduce the item, we also have with us tonight our Bowie Advisory Planning Board Chair-elect, Mr. Terry Rogers, who's going to give the report from the November hearings of the Advisory Planning Board. Frank Stevens of our staff will present the staff recommendation to you on each of the two cases. And I did want to mention for your information that if there are questions about the traffic impacts of this project, we have a special guest with us tonight. That's Miss Erica Rigby, who is the Assistant District Engineer for Traffic with the Maryland State Highway Administration. She's sitting in the back row with a number of her staff, and she's here as a resource if there are any traffic-specific related questions that you might have. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Mr. Rogers to give the Advisory Planning Board's report.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, city staff, city council and staff. My name is Terry Rogers, and I am here representing Michael Bird, who is the chair of the Bowie Advisory Planning Board. He was unable to be here tonight, so I'll be giving the report. On January 16th, the applicant presented its preliminary plan of subdivision, which was 4-19032, and its detailed site plan, DSP-19040, And the applicant these applications were submitted simultaneously. However, were presented separately. However, they were separately voted on. The board recognized that staff had recommended approval based on their findings that the project met the standards for approval. We had 4 residents signed up to speak at the meeting, and there was considerable concern about the safe flow of traffic, particularly the northbound traffic trying to access the property. However, after the applicant heard those concerns from the community and also several concerns from the Planning Advisory Board, the applicant was unable to clearly articulate what State Highway Administration's position was on whether or not there would be a cutover from the Amber Ridge site onto northbound 301 traffic. So being that there was, I guess, indecision or there wasn't clarity on what the State Highway Administration's position would be, the board voted unanimously to table a decision on that project until the applicant was able to come back to us and let us know whether or not there would be a cutover, a signalized cutover from southbound 301 onto northbound 301 at the Amber Ridge subdivision. So on the matter of the preliminary plan of subdivision for TAC 19032, the board voted unanimously 4-0 to table that motion until we got further information from the applicant. And then on the matter of the detailed site plan, DSP 19040, again, the board voted to table a decision on that until we had full or more information from the applicant. And that's the report. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Any questions?
I'll just say one thing. Congratulations, Mr. Rogers, on becoming the new chair of the Planning Board.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. For the record, Frank Stevens of the City Planning Staff, here tonight to review with you both the Amber Ridge preliminary plan of subdivision and the detailed site plan. I'll refer to our staff report as well as the PowerPoint slide which correlates to the attachments in each respective report. The property is located on the west side of southbound Route 301, approximately 3/10 of a mile south of the Mitchellville Road intersection. It contains 19 acres, is zoned MXT, mixed-use transportation oriented, and at this time the site is vacant. On page 4 of our preliminary plan report is the summary of the stakeholders meeting for this project that was held on October 30th of last year. Also on page 4, we begin a description of the proposal, which is for 2 retail commercial lots and 200 residential lots for 200 attached single-family dwelling units. The analysis of our report begins also on page 4 and includes the findings that must be made to approve a preliminary plan of subdivision pursuant to subtitle 24 of the county regulations. Included in those are adequate public facilities, the provisions for wildlife conservation and tree preservation, woodland conservation, and the submission of a stormwater management concept plan prior to the approval of a preliminary subdivision plan. On page 5, we begin the discussion on adequate public facilities, which includes water and sanitary sewer facilities, police facilities, fire and rescue facilities, school facilities, and traffic impacts. The exhibit on the screen is the Stormwater Management Concept Plan. It's attachment 3, and a discussion of that plan is on page 8 in our report. The stormwater management is proposed to be handled on-site via a series of vital retention facilities and 2 stormwater management facilities. The larger one is located in the northeastern corner of the site in this location. Attachment 4 is the Woodland Conservation Plan. That we discussed that on page 8 of our report. This has been approved by Prince George's County. There are approximately 2 acres of woodlands that exist on the site. 4.9 acres of woodlands are required, and the applicant is proposing to meet the woodland conservation requirements off-site. On page 9 of our report, we discuss conformance with the master plan, and we've identified three reasons that support this mixed-use development and its conformance with the Bowie and Vicinity 2006 master plan. In summary, we're recommending approval of preliminary plan of subdivision 19032 with the conditions stated on page 9 of our report. That concludes the staff presentation with respect to the preliminary subdivision plan. I'm going to turn in a minute to the detailed site plan, which is another PowerPoint show because it has some different attachments to it. So turning to DSP 19040, this is attachment 1, and it's the same illustrative plan that we saw previously in the preliminary subdivision plan. On page 4 of our report, we talk about the purposes of detailed site plans that were established pursuant to the county zoning ordinance and the findings that must be made to approve a detailed site plan in accordance with the Prince George's County zoning ordinance. On page 5, we discuss the site and building data for the proposed townhouse units, which include lot size, building height, on-site parking, circulation, and access. These next 14 slides are the slides of the proposed elevations for the units. These are attachments 2A through 2O. There are reviews of the elevations and the materials that are proposed, and those features are discussed on page 6 of our report. I'll just briefly go through these because they are attached to our report. There are 3 width types proposed in the project: 16 feet wide, 20 feet wide, and 24 feet wide units. Each unit would have a garage. The 16 4-foot wide units would have a single car, and the rest would have 2-car garage provided. There are 7 townhouse models that will be offered in this development. This is attachment 3, and it's identification of the proposed recreational amenities. We discussed those on page 8 of our report. The amenities include a multi-age play area, which is shown in the upper left-hand corner of this slide. There are benches that are proposed, a pergola, which is shown down here and would be located in the eastern portion of the residential area of this site. The next 3 slides are for A, B, and C, and they are the landscape plan for this development. They're all native, non-invasive species that are being used within the project. And we made one recommendation that regards the on 4C, then that the median into the site from 301 be landscaped as well. We discussed lighting on page 9, and we recommend that lighting be provided in the alleyways and in the play area, which is located in this vicinity right here. There is signage proposed. We discussed that on page 9 of our report. And this is the sign. It's attachment 5 and will be located as you drive into the site from 301. We had 2 recommendations with respect to this particular feature, and that the proposed uplighting be replaced with another form of lighting for the sign, and that low-growing native landscaping be installed across the base of the entire sign and its foundation. On page 9, we talk about the stormwater management. This is attachment 6, and we talked about that earlier with the preliminary plan of subdivision. Attachment 7 is the woodland conservation map. We just discussed that on pages 9 and 10 of our report, same comments as in the preliminary plan of subdivision. And on page 10, we talk about conformance again with the master plan, and we touched on those earlier as well. In conclusion, we're recommending approval of the DSP with the conditions stated on pages 10 and 11 of our report, and that concludes the staff presentation of both the preliminary plan of subdivision and the detailed site plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the council? Yeah. Well, the applicant comes forward. No clarity from the city.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Matthew Tedesco of the law firm of McNamee Hosey here on behalf of the applicant CBR Amber Ridge LLC. And although it's been said, I'd like to echo some comments. Congratulations on your elections. This is my first opportunity to appear before you since the election. Although I feel I will be seeing each other more in the future, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate each and every one of you. I want to thank Mr. Minor, Mr. Stevens, for their review of these applications and their very thorough technical staff reports. I also want to thank the APB for its review of this. I do want to just clarify one thing that Mr. Rogers indicated, and congratulations to Mr. Rogers on his recent appointment. The motion, as I remember and as articulated in the memorandum, I think Mr. Rogers said they were waiting on information from the applicant, but the motion dealt with SHA's response to the requested median break for a northbound turn lane. That was provided on December 10th. And so I just wanted to make sure that it was clear that it wasn't technically something that the applicant needed to submit, but it was just a response from SHA in review of its traffic, in review of our traffic impact analysis. We have all full members of our development team here with us today, and I don't need to introduce them by name, but they all are here if you have any specific questions. As some of you know, some of you may not know, the Amber Ridge property has been approved for development for at least 30 years. Before this iteration of the development plan, the property was shovel-ready, platted, ready to go for a 200,000 square foot shopping center. Unfortunately for the owner at that time, when the giant food store moved north off of Excalibur Road, the Pointer Ridge Shopping Center, as we all know, that anchor tenant was vacant for a number of years up until recently when Sky Zone took over that space. The commercial market never realized itself with respect to this property. There was an inability to obtain an anchor tenant to support the 200,000 square foot shopping center. So although it sat and was ready, shovel ready for many, many years, it never was developed. In circa 2012, 2013, the property owner sought to redevelop the property pursuant to the vision and goals of the master plan, which, as we all know, is the 2006 Bowie City Master Plan. It recommended for this property mixed use, as Mr. Stevens indicated in his staff report, to accommodate the Point Ridge Mixed Use Activity Center. In 2014, the property was rezoned to MXT, and although not within the municipal boundaries of the city of Bowie, throughout that process, we have, like we have in this process, engaged with the city and gone through its charrette process with respect to stakeholder meetings, work sessions with advisory boards, and then obviously meetings among the council. The property was rezoned in 2014 to accommodate a mixed-use development. Subsequently to that, in 2017, the conceptual site plan pursuant to the MXT zone was again vetted and reviewed through the city's process and recommended for approval and ultimately approved by the Planning Board of Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission of Prince George's County. So here we are, as promised back then, the next phase of development, which is the preliminary plan and subdivision and the detailed site plan. The detailed site plan is, however, limited to just the residential component. There are no tenants currently for the 2 commercial pads. A subsequent detailed site plan will be required at that time once those tenants are identified and building elevations can be put forward. So with that, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I do want to acknowledge and thank Ms. Ruby, who's here on behalf of the State Highway Administration. Excuse me, Ms. Rigby. Gosh, sorry. It's been a long day, sorry. Ms. Rigby from the State Highway Administration and her staff. We have undertaken our best efforts to accommodate the APB and the community's wishes for a median break. We went above and beyond our initial traffic impact study to propose that. Subsequently, for SHA's review, we had a meeting with State Highway Administration with your staff on December 10th. And then from that meeting offered other alternatives. At the end of the day, State Highway Administration in its letters that were released indicated its approval of the traffic impact improvement, the improvements that are recommended by your staff. So we stand before you appreciative of the efforts of your staff, certainly understanding the concerns of some of the residents that have been involved in this project, but we are here to accept all conditions as proposed by your staff and respectfully request the council's support for both the detailed site plan and the preliminary plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Questions?
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
This is more of a question for both you and staff. Does anyone have a copy of what SHA said on December 10th? I don't think we can see that in our packet on this end.
Mayor Pro Tem, I know a letter was written. We have it in our files, but it's not here this evening with us. Perhaps Mr. Tedesco or his consultant has a copy of the letter.
I have a copy, if I may.
It's a long letter to read, but
No.
yeah, do you guys have? No, yeah, we should have had a copy of this.
Yeah, no.
As you're reading through,
It's just that would confuse things.
Councilman, would you mind if you check if anybody else had any questions? Any other questions while Mayor Pro Tem is reading through? Are there any other questions from anyone?
I do have a question about this item. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you all for coming out this evening. I understand that this has been approved for 30-some plus years. I'm aware of that as far as development. And I think initially the development was approved for commercial only.
Yes, sir.
And then you came back to Bowie Council for recommendation for MXT, the change, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Pursuant, if I may, I'm sorry, Mr. Garner, pursuant to the recommendation of the master plan, which recommended mixed use for the Point Ridge Mixed Use Activity Center that was designated for this property.
And I do remember the logic behind the previous council in support of the housing component, residential component, going in there to eliminate actually traffic as opposed to it being a shopping center. It would go to more residential to avoid. The logic behind that was assuming there would be less traffic on 301. That was, I understand the logic. My question to you all is, there's only one entrance to this, correct? This project?
There's two from southbound 301. There's two existing right-in, right-out curb cuts that exist today. One in the center of the property and one to the south before the bank, the O-Line Bank building.
Before O-Line Bank. Was there ever on this, in this project, any plans for a rear entrance outside of that? I mean, maybe avoiding having to put so much of this traffic on 301?
To Pittsfield?
Yes.
No, sir.
There was.
No, there's existing single-family detached residential homes all along the back, so there wouldn't be accessibility to Pittsfield.
Are there any other streets or any other?
Point Ridge Place to Point Ridge Drive is an alternative access point.
Okay, now, but as the way your project looks, it is currently blocked off. There are no rear entrances. I'm asking this a question.
Yeah,
I don't know.
There's no vehicular access points on the west side of the project.
Would you all consider opening and making, I guess, I'm seeing some of the residents' heads are shaking like, no, don't do that.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to get some of this traffic off of 301. I mean, it's like all of these projects are going to be an impact on 301, where we already have traffic congestion. It's not going to get any better on 301. I do not see it getting any better anytime soon. However, I don't want to continue to add to its problem.
Yeah, so if I may, Mr. Garner, I think there is no ability to have access to Pittsfield. One, there's just no room. There's single-family homes existing there that basically line Pittsfield, and then the property immediately to the north is the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission property. There's topographical, environmental, and other impacts that limit the ability to extend a road further north.
Okay.
There's pretty significant environmental features to the north, actually. With respect to your comment, as I've said many, many times, I don't stand before this council or any body of this city and try to pretend there isn't concerns or issues or traffic on 301. I mean, that we all recognize.
We all are aware of that, yeah.
We're required to make sure we don't make it worse.
Correct.
And so what I can say to you is, and I appreciate the concern, but what I can say to you with the conditions of approval, that we're required to make actual improvements to these intersections, Mitchellville as well as Point Ridge Drive. Our impact to those intersections won't be any worse than what they are today. And that is the guidelines under the law of the county with respect to adequate public facilities. So I can't solve the problem. It takes more than just one project and significant funding to solve. But what I can say is, based upon the review of the traffic impact analysis, not only reviewed by your staff, the State Highway Administration, Prince George's County, DPW&T, the impacts with improvements that we're proposing won't be any worse.
Okay. And my question, another question quickly. The 20,000 square feet of commercial retail, what are you planning to put in that square footage?
So we don't have any users right now under the traffic impact study. I think we analyzed it under service-oriented type retail, a general characterization to make sure the trip cap was accommodating, but we don't have any end users right now. Okay. We will have to come back again under that detailed site plan when we have users.
And my last question, I did have one other. What are your ranges, your price range that you think these townhomes would sell for?
I'll have to get that from the builder if you would indulge me for a second.
Certainly, certainly.
Thank you for that. I'm told the starting price point will be around 360, 370, and then up into the 400s.
Okay.
Depending on, I mean, there's 3 different products proposed, 24 foot. That would be really small.
Okay. Dollhouse.
You have to forgive me. I was in a 10-hour
I
DHE
understand,
hearing this morning.
totally.
24-foot towns, which basically line the exterior, 20-foot towns, and then 16-foot towns.
Okay.
So the price point varies based upon product type. But what we're trying to do with the 3 different product types is provide differentiation in the market and differentiation price points to hit the folks that can afford, to live in this community, but may not be able to afford the biggest of the models.
Understood. And you are aware of the the inventory of townhomes that are coming online here in the city of Bowie, as well as in the region. I say that because it's a lot of townhomes that are coming to our community, and to be real with you, if anything, I would like to see more single family. I understand you want to maximize your development site, the acreage. You want to put as much on that as possible to make as much as, the developer wants to make as much as possible off of that site. But we have 600 townhomes in the pipeline at the airport. We have another 200, I believe, that are on 200 to 300 that are online at 301 at Mill Branch. And then we have another several hundred that are online over at Carrington, which is just a mile or so down the road from you, and not to mention all the others. I can't even think. I'm recovering from the flu, so my mind is not completely there. But I'm just saying it's just so much inventory. One, I'm concerned if you're going to be competitive and able to move your product. That's one of my concerns. The other concern is if we need any more of these type of developments in the community, simply because, I personally feel that we have a number of townhomes that we may want to start seeing some more single families and additional valued homes, because if we have a community that has just one particular type of style, then it's a bit overwhelming. That's just my advice that I just wanted to offer to you as you're doing this. But I understand you want to maximize your return on your land.
Well, it's not so much that, but and again, I appreciate that, and we do understand the sentiment of this body as well as the city generally with respect to that. I will say that this project, unlike some of the ones that you mentioned, and not to put one project over the other because that's not what I'm trying to do, but I will say from a conceptual site plan standpoint, this is 100% consistent with that. That was approved over 3 years ago, was contemplated over 4 years ago. So this is not new development. This is a continuation of development that's started almost 8 years ago in contemplation, I might add.
Well, it's new. You haven't broken the ground just yet, but thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a process.
It's a process. Excuse me, why don't we move on? We need to have
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Comments made. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you.
By the community. Coca-Cola Rosario Video. Ideo.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. It's nice to see you again, but I'm not here in a very joyful mood. I've been, like I said before, I've been a member of Bowie for over 50 years. And this sleeping giant of 19 acres has been sitting there for 50 years. It was zoned as a shopping center back in '69. It finally moved somewhere in the early 90s, I believe. And your predecessors voted with the members of Bowie that they should not build this shopping center because it didn't have proper egress and exit from the shopping center, that it was all going to come down on Pointer Ridge Drive. State Highway Administration was adamant they were not going to give the shopping center any access to 301 except what those accesses that the property has now. Then all of a sudden, I guess around 2009, 2010, I guess about then, State Highway Administration said, oh yes, this is a shopping center. It needs a crossover. It needs lights. Then all of a sudden, the shopping center failed. And the developer said, oh, we got to get this land developed, so we'll change it to mixed use. So they went through the process of changing it to mixed use. And of course, the planning board approved it. And State Highway came and said, oh, it's only a development of houses. It doesn't need a crossover. It doesn't need lights. Back, I guess, about 30 years ago, I was standing in front of the planning board. And myself and a colleague of mine accused the planning board of approving developments without taking road development in consideration. And we accused them of being responsible for the crosses that were on 301. And one of the members of the board, I guess I can mention her name, Mrs. O'Neill. She was a member of the board at that time. I don't know if the lady is alive now or not. I hope she is. And she challenged us. And the general counsel came back. She asked the general counsel for a decision, and they came back and said, your first point of order is the safety of the citizens of Prince George's County. Right?
Thank you.
Now, State Highway Administration doesn't think that 200 houses needs a light or a crossover at 301 because it will impede traffic. If you look at 197 at Gallant Fox Development, they have that light, just in the same proximity as Mitchellville Road and Pointer Ridge Drive. The light is about the same distances. But it's not needed for development of a housing development. But for a shopping center or for offices, they need it. As members of the Council of the City of Bowie, you need to keep us safe. One thing you have to take into consideration is that this traffic that's going to be coming off of 301, off of this development, is going to put extra use on our streets. And you're going to be responsible for keeping these streets in operation. You're going to have to come out and repave these streets because of the extra traffic that's going to be on there. We have extra traffic now. We have it now. I have trouble getting in and out of my house now. With 200 houses, I'm going to have more problems. And they'll be coming down Pointer Ridge Place. They will not go out on 301 because they can't get out on 301.
And we appreciate your comments and thank you for coming forward.
Well, I know you're all new. You don't know what's going on here. please get educated. Thank you.
All right, thank you so very much. Jackie Ward.
Hi, my name is Jackie Lord. I live at 15808 Plainview Lane in the Pointer Ridge section. And my concerns are similar to Russ Idio's. I'm really concerned about the traffic problems. My understanding is that the solution is to have a extra left turn lane on 301. But what that requires is for cars to go across multiple lanes on a road that is either backed up or extremely busy, and that is extremely dangerous. It is similar in my mind to the problems that exist at the Walmart shopping center. They actually have put a barrier to prevent people from going across. And yet I have seen people come out of the giant Walmart entrance and make a little curve to go around the barrier, or they come out the 7-Eleven. They will take chances. And what ends up are accidents and fatalities. And the question is, how many fatalities is it going to take before somebody does something? My other concern, and this has not been mentioned an awful lot, it's only partially referred to, is Pointer Ridge Place. When people find out that it is difficult to get out of 301, I guarantee they're going to go down Pointer Ridge Place. It's next to the post office. When the post office is in operation, there's less than one lane of traffic that can get through. And if you look anywhere in Bowie, when there's traffic, people go down the side roads. They go down Mitchellville Road to get off of 301. They will go down any road they can to avoid traffic, and they will go down Pointer Ridge Place. Getting out on Pointer Ridge Drive, it is backed up many times because of the light. And so it is very difficult, and people will start taking chances over there to make left-hand turns. So safety is a very big concern for this development. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. Roseanne Snyder.
Don't worry, we're not going through all this. My name is Ruth Ann Snyder. I live at 1707 Pittsfield Lane, Bowie. I'm an adjoining property owner to Amber Ridge. The first trees came down on November 18th, 1989. I'm glad to say they're back. We have wildlife, and it's great back there. I do want to mention one thing before I continue. When I looked on one site on the internet, there were 327 homes for sale in Bowie today, plus 185 foreclosures. So justify 200 more townhouses. What I'm going to talk about is the soil core sample reports. They are not, I have not seen them. I've talked to the city planning staff, they don't have them. Before they can, as a property owner who has been flooded and continues to gain water from this piece of property, I live on the top side, is that this property is not developable until they have a soil, a Marlboro clay. It's the same that was at Fort Washington, and we know what happened to those homes. Granted, these won't go down a hill, but they'll sink. And in order to mitigate the problem, because you cannot build on soil, on Marlboro clay, when they built the old lime bank, they pounded pilings in, because it was one building, for 6 months in order for the building to be stable, and that's right next to 301. Within 6 months, if you drive towards south on 301, the right-hand side of the building, I'd love to go to the top of it with a pencil, has been slowly, you can see that it tilts. And that's because of the Marlboro clay. And I want it on the record again that this property is full of it. I have pictures from when they took the soil core samples. I have samples. I personally, our homes, Levitt built them on Marlboro clay. So but we're single family homes, but we do have, you know, the cracks and things like that. Plus the water that still flows off, even though they closed down the pond, they put in perforated pipe only halfway down. And so all the water still comes down. You can drive down Pittsfield and the last 3 houses are the worst. And the flood water used to go straight directly through my neighbor's yard, down through the next neighbor's yard, clear to the community center. This is the kind of surface water problem that's on this property. Until the playground, we have a playground by the way, had to be closed at the community center because it had all been eroded out. So they're trying to build homes for people on property that needs to either have the entire amount of Marlboro clay, which would be at least $2 million, taken out of the 19 acres, and then it has to be, soil has to be brought in. There is, as Mr. Tedesco stated, environmental impacts because there's a creek that runs behind the community center, flows under 301 to the Patuxent River. I have had work stop orders from DNR, EPA on that property in the past before they owned it. I will do it again because of all the problems with this piece of property. It's not a developable piece of property because of this. If it were my property and I wanted to make money off of it, I'd put a solar panel field back there. It's something we can't see. It would, you know, help the environment, help climate change, and they wouldn't have to deal with the Marlboro clay issue. But they're going to deal with it because it's not right that they continue to be doing what they're doing and then try to build 200 homes plus commercial on property that's not ready to be built on. Okay. So I would like you all to consider that, study your stormwater management, and the University of Maryland has done a study prior to them doing their soil care samples. Years ago they did out, and it is established that there is, now it's just established it's a bigger field, okay? So please consider these things, and I do not think this project is even close to being ready to be approved.
Thank you very much.
You're very much welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay. We have a few questions, but let me ask one first. Mr. Rogers, well, actually, Joe, it's more about process. Typically, how does the process work when the planning board tables something? When corrections are made, things are done, it does not go back to the planning board for them to be able to give us an accurate recommendation from them?
Usually there is no time for that to happen, Mayor. The county planning board date is really what is driving everything. In this case, that for the preliminary plan is February 6th. So there's a window of time in which the city has to take a position in time to get it to the county planning board, and frequently there is not enough time for the city to go back and forth between the board and the council.
All right, thank you. All right, question.
I just want to make one comment, and then I'll make a motion after. Just for future reference, we should, and I'm saying this in the public domain for a reason, we should have a conversation about what happens when the BAPB does table something, and that's something we need to really focus on, right? I understand that you guys are past the entitlement phase. I understand that the county's going to go with you guys on this. I understand that you guys have been in this for a long time. So with that being said, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move. Oh, yeah, for sure. I'll let my colleagues ask questions before my motion.
have a question.
I will recognize.
Just real
Ingrid
quickly.
Harrison.
Thank you for your presentation. My question is, I didn't see an answer in the letter regarding the SHA approving the 301 cut-through, the northbound cut-through. Will they approve that or not approve? Or is that SHA, if they're, that would be great if they could answer that for me.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us this evening. I'm Erica Rigby, and I'm the Deputy District Engineer for District 3. So part of my role is to also oversee access management and that process of the review and approval for various developments.
Excuse me, I don't think they can hear you.
Is the mic on?
Just lift the mic up a little. There you go.
Sorry, not used to a microphone. And I'm tall, so it's not working for me. Thank you. So again, sorry, I'm Erica Rigby. I'm the Deputy District Engineer for District 3. So part of my role is overseeing access management, which includes the review of various developments from the traffic impact study through the plan review and ultimately the permit approval. Right now, Amber Ridge for us is in the traffic impact study review phase. So we reviewed various options. Option 1 and option 2 were first proposed to us. Sorry. Option 1 was just the right-in, right-out with additional improvements south at the Pointer Ridge intersection. And then we also had option 2, which was the cut-through. And then later on, after discussion, we did have a third option, which also included a left. At this point, we have approved option 1. Option 2 and option 3 had concerns. There were concerns with safety. There were concerns with operations along the 301 corridor.
And option 1 could you just explain it?
Option 1 was maintaining the existing entrance, which was the right in and right out as shown on the plan. And then there are additional improvements south, which I believe included the left, a double left onto northbound 301. And a free right at Mitchellville to go south.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilman Dufour?
Not for SHA, but in general. Does anyone have anything for SHA? We're good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'll let you go first, then I'll go.
So I have thank you, Mr. Mayor, a couple of issues here. The first one is I'm a little miffed that we have before us something that's been going on for decades, and yet we don't have time in this process for the questions that are presented by the Bowie Advisory Planning Board to be, responded to. We've heard about this for going on for forever. I recognize that, time marches on and we need to move things forward. But then all of a sudden, when the planning board comes forward and they have a question about access, it can't be properly discussed, and they're not in a position to make a proper recommendation to this council, which begs the question of why we bother having such an organization at our disposal if we have people that are presenting material to them in such short time frame that they're not able to do their job. So I find that is particularly disconcerting. And you can sort that out amongst yourselves as to the responsible, culpable parties there. Part of it, I think, is on the part of the developer and not having the time ahead of time. I don't know that. The other part is the scheduling on the staff's part, ensuring that the advisory planning board gets what they need when they need it, and that they don't get the last, here's an afterthought, and we'll allow somebody to come in and toss it in, and if they have questions, there's no ability for them to respond. So from the staff, from the standpoint of staff, I'd like to ask that we ensure that in the future, that time is allowed for the planning board to both review and then to have any follow-up questions that they may have responded to before they can present their thoughts to us. Because frankly, just hearing that they've tabled it doesn't do much for me. I'm also sympathetic to one of the comments I'd heard earlier about the example, which we have for many years here called the Walmart weave, and that propensity for traffic, despite better judgment and safety, wandering across 3+ lanes of traffic so they can go make a left turn, U-turn somewhere further downstream. And I think this has that opportunity as well. And then I would like to ask the applicant to come forward for a quick moment to shed any light they might have on the subject matter of the Marlboro clay, what you know about that, and how that is considered in your plans and your path forward.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfrey. If I may take the opportunity to also just clarify one comment that you made.
Please, absolutely.
With your indulgence. Just so the timing is understood with respect to the comment about not having sufficient time. So we met with Advisory Planning Board on November 12th. The SHA letter with respect to its review of the traffic impact analysis was issued on December 10th, less than a month later. And here we are almost a month and 2 weeks from that. So I can't answer it any more than there was sufficient time. It wasn't for any other reason other than I don't know what goes on internally, but I think
I appreciate that's helpful.
I just want to make sure the timeline is understood.
That's a helpful start in trying to eliminate this happening in the future.
I don't want a perception of that things are being rushed through. I think your staff has done a yeoman's task of trying to accommodate the wills of this council, not only this council, but prior councils and the citizens who have been active in this case. This is why we had a meeting with SHA with your staff on December 10th to explore other options other than the first two that were originally reviewed, and SHA reviewed all 3 different options. So with respect to Ms. Snyder, who I've had a chance to come to know over these many years, and I do understand her original concerns with flooding on her property. I'm not here to challenge her or question her. The property owner did undertake significant improvements to remove what used to be a pond close to her residential lot. It is now no longer there. The head walls have been removed and improved. There is now a pipe that runs to the existing stormwater management pond. So although I'm not questioning or challenging her statements with respect to flooding still occurs, we will look into that. There shouldn't be any continuous flooding because the issues that she was experiencing many, many, many years ago had been, as far as we understood, taken care of and remediated. With respect to the marble clay, it's kind of a red herring. With all due respect to Ms. Snyder, I don't believe she's a geologist, but I will tell you that my client has undertaken a significant number of core boring samples on this property. I think over 200 to be exact, maybe over 150, all of which have been done to analyze the impacts of any marble clay on the property. All grading and soil, all has to be reviewed by Soil Conservation District before any permits can be issued. Department of Permitting Enforcement and Inspections have to be reviewed and enforced. So with respect to her comment that there needs to be efforts, in as much as there does need to be. All that is going to be through the permitting process done by Soil Conservation District as well as the Department of Permitting Enforcement and Inspection. So, like I said, I think it's a little bit of a red herring. It's not to say the property is undevelopable. It absolutely is developable. In as much as there are any issues we don't believe there to be, based upon the core boring samples, the numerous ones that have been pulled. And so with that, I can only answer the question by saying that that's why we have to go through Soil Conservation District as well as DPI before any permits can be issued.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I want to move to...
1 second.
I'm sorry.
Golly,
I'm
you
so
guys,
sorry,
come
Mr. Mayor
on.
Pro Tem. We keep... We're yanking your chain tonight, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I actually just have a really brief statement. I appreciate, first of all, the Mayor Pro Tem putting up with me tonight. But secondly, I appreciate the applicant's time and SHA's time. We're really glad to see you here tonight, and I appreciate the residents' comments and staff's work. This is mostly directed towards residents. You have a new city council up here, right? We had a bit of a sea change in the last election. And this body is not what I would describe, and I think I can safely say this body is not what I would describe as blindly enthusiastic about new development. I think that's a fair statement. We voted no on every project that's come before us so far unanimously. We're keenly aware of what residents are saying to us about their concerns about excessive growth and all the negative byproducts thereof, namely congestion. I can also tell you, as someone who's been doing this for 4 years, my biggest frustration is that a lot of new growth happens, and there's a lot of new tax revenue generated from that growth. There's anywhere from $15,000 to $23,000 in impact fees per unit that developers pay. There's all sorts of new property taxes they pay, but the vast majority of that money doesn't come to Bowie. It goes to the county, as well as Maryland National Park and Planning and other agencies, and the vast majority of that money doesn't come back here. So the big ticket items that we think about when it comes to new development, namely roads and schools, we tend not to see a level of investment in the areas in Bowie where the development is happening consistent with the amount of tax money that's being sent to the county. It tends to end up in other buckets and goes towards other priorities. And that's really the issue we have. I think I speak on behalf of most of my constituents when I say that if more of the impact fees and the generated tax revenue from new growth came back to Bowie and came to our schools and our roads and improvements that are far superior to the ones than we see, I think residents would have far fewer problems with development. So that's all I really have to say. Beyond that, the City Council in this case is just making a recommendation tonight. This is not in the incorporated City of Bowie, it's just in our zip code. On pretty much all development decisions, the Prince George's County Council, typically acting as the district council, is the final arbiter on development decisions. So while we hear you and while we largely agree with you about development concerns, they need to hear you in Upper Marlboro. And so,
Thank you, Councilman.
I'm sorry?
I was saying thank you.
Oh, great. They need to hear from you in Upper Marlboro. So be sure that you're reaching out to your at-large county council members and Todd Turner, the chair of the county council, and our district council member, because they're the ones who ultimately need to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, okay. That was good. Mr. Mayor, I move that we push this issue back to the Bowie Advisory Planning Board, as they have not had sufficient information to make a real decision here.
I'd like to second that motion.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion?
I want to ask a question about that. If we, on the motion, yes, if we were to push that back to the Advisory Planning Board, my question is to staff. What does this do? I mean, pushing it back to them, what action occurs as a result of pushing it back there? What's the outcome? What's the result of it?
Is that directed to me?
What's the...
Mr. Gardner, there would be an opportunity for the board to examine the information that came from the State Highway Administration, and then they would decide whether they wanted to make a recommendation to you, either in favor of the staff recommendation or something different.
Okay, and my question then is will we get that recommendation prior to February 6th, I believe, that they're going in front of the county?
It is conceivable the way that the dates fall. The advisory board does have a meeting next week on the 28th, and you have a meeting on February 3rd.
Okay.
So it is conceivable just because of the way the dates
Okay.
lay out. It's typically not that way, but here you do have the luxury of hitting both boards.
Thank you, Mr. Minor, and then I would agree with that then as well. Thank you.
Any unreadiness? Call for the vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Next, Mr. Mayor, we have the Prince George's County Board of Elections. Ms. Alicia Alexander wants to discuss the potential use of the city gym for voting.
Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this evening. As indicated, my name is Alicia Alexander, and I'm the election director for Prince George's County. And I'm here to respectfully request that...
Excuse me one second.
Okay.
Could we take the conversations out, please? My apologies.
Oh, no problem. I'm here to, again, my name is Alicia Alexander, and I am the election director for Prince George's County, and I am here to respectfully request that the Board of Elections be allowed to continue to use the Bowie Gymnasium at least through the 2020 election cycle, meaning the April 2020 and the November 2020 presidential elections. While I know that, and I'm not going to belabor the point because many of the speakers who presented basically stole my thunder, but while I do know that there were some challenges at the Bowie Gymnasium, and voters have become accustomed to voting there. They have been there since, as someone mentioned, since 2016, since the 2016 cycle. The facility is easily accessible to voters, and the biggest pro of utilizing the gymnasium is that it has over 18,000 square feet, which allows us from an administrative and managerial standpoint to house the necessary voting equipment, and it also can accommodate hundreds of voters simultaneously. We can move voters very quickly in and out of the Bowie Gymnasium. In addition to that, I just want to say and reiterate the fact that the Bowie Gymnasium, it consistently ranks in the top 3, and someone said in the county, but it ranks the top 3 in the state. Exactly. In the state. Yeah. And having said, and just to bring it down a notch, during 8 days of early voting during the 2016 presidential general election cycle, over 29,000 voters voted there, and that's huge. Again, in that particular cycle made it the highest performing early voting site in the state. So, based on the enthusiasm, we expect those numbers to increase during the 2020 general election. It was suggested that we use either the Bowie Community Center or Ken Hill or the Bowie Library, and to be frank, none of them are viable options. They are just too small. We did use the Bowie Community Center in the 2014 cycle, but that was before Harris Teeter and all of the other retail shops were housed in Bowie. And the traffic over there is, finding a parking space. I personally went to Harris Teeter, and it's very difficult to find a parking space at 9 o'clock at night over there. So, I just want to reiterate the fact that, again, Bowie Community Center is 7,500 square feet, which is less than half of the square footage of the gymnasium. And we really want to keep a site in Bowie. Again, I know that 8 days of early voting for the primary election and 8 days for the general election may be an inconvenience for some, but I think it's a small price to pay when you're talking about fostering democracy. And so that's my spiel. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. I'd like to address a couple of things that I think the city council and the city staff have addressed, and I'd like to ask as we move forward that one of the issues was with parking. The concern was that as those who were supporting candidates would take up the parking such that those trying to vote would not be able to park. Now, would you be willing to work with the city on making sure we design a parking strategy?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, and I didn't want to bring it up, but since you did, I can speak to it. One of the major complaints that we received that are documented complaints from voters were the big trucks and the campaign trucks that were basically stationed in the parking lot, which took up quite a bit of spaces, and a lot of electioneering, the aggressive candidates, those were actually the major concerns. But having said that, we can certainly work with the city to come up with a plan.
Another question to that is, many have referred to it as trying to break the gauntlet to get into the gymnasium to vote because of so many people canvassing, I guess is the best way to put it, for their candidates and trying to do that. A little earlier we heard talking about being able to have election judges, I guess is the term.
That's right.
And so will we be able to make sure that there was an adequate number? When you talk about having the largest polling place, will we be able now to have the third largest number of election judges to make sure that we avoid that as well?
We can certainly do that, in addition to, again, even at Bowie and several other sites in Prince George's County, several other high voter turnout sites, we do have deputy sheriffs, because it gets, and I'm trying to be diplomatic when I say this, but some candidates get very, very aggressive to the point where our election judges feel intimidated and or threatened. And so in some instances, we do have to call in the sheriff, the deputy sheriffs, to maintain order. And so we can certainly do that.
From a cost standpoint to the city, is that something that we would have to bear, or is that something we could work with?
The Prince George's County Board of Elections would absorb those costs.
Okay. All right, thank you. Anyone else, any questions?
Are we going to hear from staff on this issue?
Mr. Mayor, City Council, just to give everybody a chronology of what occurred. I got here in 2016. 2017, I was approached by the Board of Elections so that we could so they could use our facility in May of 18 and for the November election. We have a real crowded facility that gets a lot of use, that is out of action for almost 3 weeks. The second thing is, and I approved that, and I regretted it after I did, because the results of 18, I got complaints from more than 50 Bowie residents about the exceptional parking. It wasn't just the electioneers. It was the people working in the facility had taken up all the parking in the parking lot also. They didn't park far away. They parked close. And plus the electioneers, it was very crowded. Most people had to drive to somewhere in town center park and across the street. Also, we have our senior center, which has activities throughout the period. We had to block off their parking lot, otherwise people were parking there. And people moved the barriers and parked there anyway. And we had to deal with that. And I got at least 10 complaints for that. That is why. The complaints that we received about this is why I brought this matter to the previous city council when I was asked earlier if they wanted if they could have it there, because I could not make a recommendation that way under the circumstances. And the previous council said no. And that's why we're at this point. Just note that this upsets the good order and discipline of the city of Bowie in that area, and you should know that. And people will complain mightily, and I don't believe we're going to be able to get compliance the way we're promised. Also, it puts a specific stress on our police department, which only has 65 police officers, to have to police and manage this situation too. So those are all the realities of practical management. And so I just want you to be aware of it. We can, given direction, we can assign it to them, but we're going to have to deal with those issues, no doubt.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Mr. City Manager, really quick, how soon of a change are we looking at here? Are you looking at the 2020 primary election?
Yes, the 2020 primary and the general election is what's in question here.
April? I don't know.
April 28th.
Yes, April.
April 28th.
And early voting starts April 16th.
Yeah. My concern, though, I understand very well the concern from the city, as you can probably hear. My other concern, though, is about the voting of the citizens in Bowie as well, being able to exercise their right to vote. It puts us in a somewhat of a compromised situation because it hasn't been broadcast to the voting community that it would be moved. And I'm concerned that though all the disruption and though the feedback negative that we may receive, I would hate to feel that we were a part of not allowing our citizens to vote. And for me, that's most important. And so having said that, I would share again with anyone who have any questions.
Quick question for staff. This subject, if memory serves me, we had come to the conclusion that we were not going to offer the location up before. Was that communicated in the past? So
several months ago.
Several months ago.
Last summer.
And so what, back to the Board of Elections folks here, and I appreciate you coming out, what have you done to find alternative locations?
Oh, we've done everything. And that's what I just ran down the list of sites in Bowie because we specifically want to keep a site in Bowie based on the radius. And when you look at the map of the early voting sites, it just from a voting standpoint, if we remove a site in Bowie, I think we're going to have some issues.
But I think
so we looked at the Bowie Community Center, we looked at Ken Hill, we looked at the Knights of Columbus, we looked at the Bowie Library. That's just not feasible. There is really nothing feasible in terms of size that works other than the gym, which is the reason why we're asking again.
What about the Sears building?
So I have a concern here, which is, so we said no, but you didn't ask us about Ken Hill? Did you ask us if we could provide Ken Hill as a location?
We offered that.
No, that was offered as a site. And again, as I said, it just does not work.
And the concern I have is that, frankly, the city gym doesn't work. The city gym doesn't work for the community. The city gym doesn't work for the city. It doesn't work for the staff. And my concern is that we had said no, and that here we are, and there hasn't been any movement on the part of the Board of Elections to find an alternative location to settle in on another place, but to come back to us, what it sounds like we're kind of past that point, because I heard someone mention in the comments earlier this evening that there has to be a notification period for the locations, is that?
That is correct, and but we do have the flexibility to make an emergency change if we have to.
Okay. So we have options with the South Bowie Community Center and the Bowie Community Center. The Bowie Community Center has ample parking. It still maintains a presence in that part of the city of Bowie. And then we have the South Bowie, which also has an opportunity.
Logistically, South Bowie does not work.
Yeah.
It's too close to Upper Marlboro Community Center from a mileage standpoint. It just would not work logistically.
I think we're at that point, though, where it is something that we need to discuss moving forward. I think Councilman Wolfley makes a very good point, and that is we're in a precarious situation because even though it was said no, that the notices weren't sent out. But in that light, I do believe that we're now past that point. We do need to decide what we're going to do now because time is of the essence. So,
Mr. Mayor, if I can make a question.
For staff.
Mayor Pro Tem? Oh.
Actually, I yield to Michael to make a question.
When someone came out mics, because we get too many. Thank you. Question for staff. So I'm just reading through this. So Kent Hill Center has 142 parking spaces. The Bowie Community Center has 175. The city gym is 133, so it's actually got less parking than the other two locations. But am I reading this correctly that staff is willing to make available 2 locations, if not the gym? Am I understanding that correctly? I see Dan Mears nodding his head aggressively.
That does not work in accordance to state law.
Why not?
Because we can only have, in accordance to state law, 11 sites.
Okay, because a lot of people accused us of trying to suppress the vote by not having this at a location where residents keep complaining there's not enough parking. But the issue is we're actually willing to make many more spaces available, but you're saying that the state prevents us from doing that.
And as I said earlier, the biggest plus for the gym is the square footage, not necessarily the parking. We can come up with a viable parking plan, but it's the square footage for to accommodate the number of voters that vote at Bowie. And Bowie is just increasing election after election after election. And so the Bowie gym allows us, if necessary, to add additional voting equipment, additional booths, et cetera. And again, we can house hundreds of people with 18,000 square feet versus the 7,500 approximately that the Bowie gym has. And Kent Hill has significantly less space, and so does the Bowie Library.
Sure, but if we were to offer the Kent Hill Center and the Bowie Community Center and throw in the South Bowie Community Center, you would have 3 times the locations, way more convenience.
But as I said, that we have 11 sites in Prince George's County, and that's in accordance to the state law. The law does offer us an option to add an additional site. However, we cannot have 2 sites in Bowie.
Yeah, I think.
So I just want to be extremely clear about something, though, because I don't want anyone coming in here accusing us of voter suppression when we are literally willing to give you 3 different sites, right? Don't ever use the word voter suppression in here when we are willing to give you 3
I never said
locations.
voter suppression.
I know.
That didn't.
But
Yeah,
there was a tenor.
I think we need to understand that. We understand. We know that you never used that. You never alluded to that. We understand that. I think.
We're offering 3 locations,
Pro
and
Tem.
we're not the ones who waited until the last minute.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. This is a very serious issue for me. Across the country, we see trends, and I'm not calling this voter suppression, but we see trends like this happen, right? As a person who in his full-time job manages a staff that's in charge of an entire congressional district, including Prince George's County, I had no idea that this was a thing, which means that come April, I was going to send my staff to the Bowie Gymnasium and ready to be active, right? So here's my concern. As a person who represents this district, as a person who has 3 senior homes in his district, this is important to us. The reality is that the Bowie Gymnasium needs to be the place for the 2020 cycle without question. However, let me say this as well. There's an opportunity with redevelopment at Sears. there's an opportunity with a bunch of other locations for us to have an election place that can accommodate the type of people who come. Again, this is during early vote, I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but during early vote, people from across the county are able to come
Across the state.
and vote. Well, it's county by county.
Well, actually, you can come from Baltimore and vote in Prince George's County. It's open.
And so,
doing early voting.
so Bowie is the home to voting for the last 4 years, and we want to continue that trend. So I don't want anyone to think that that's not the case here. We're just trying to find the best alternative for our police department, for candidates, and for our city. And so with that, Mr. Mayor, I move that we support the Board of Elections recommendation and keep voting at the Bowie Gymnasium for the 2020 cycle.
May I make a, hey, you need a second before I can make an amendment?
No, there's been a motion put on the floor.
I'd like to second.
It's
I'd like to offer-
moved and properly second.
But with the statement.
I'd
I
like
was going to do a
to,
discussion.
Yes,
Let me do
with
it.
the discussion.
Moved and properly second discussion?
yes, I'd like to make an amendment that it's for this cycle only, and that subsequent cycles will be at a different location.
I agree with that. That's where I was going to go with that.
Can we also somehow include in our motion language about managing this? Because we got so many complaints from residents, many of whom ended up not voting because they couldn't find parking or they couldn't get through the army of volunteers who were there. We got to come up with a plan to manage the parking in a way that's enforceable. Because the issue is we told people what to do last time, or we tried to, and they just ignored us. So is there any way that we can include in our motion some sort of language for an agreement about how we're going to manage this? Because I'm not going to make staff go through this again, and I'm sure as heck not going to field those complaints again when we have made available so many other spaces.
Okay. Would you like to amend your motion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor. I move that we support the Board of Elections recommendation to keep this gymnasium open for early voting and for election day, both primary and general elections for the 2020 election. In addition, I would like for staff, the council, and the Board of Elections to immediately start finding remedies for the 22 cycle.
I second that.
It's been moved and properly second. Discussion? If not, call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out.
Thank you so much.
Excuse me, quick question.
You need to-
Council members Harrison and Debumata, did you guys vote in favor? I didn't see. Okay, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry. Just want to make sure I get the right ones. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
It's just to consult with council.
go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I move to adjournment and move to closed session to consult. Do we?
You guys got one more item, the sports fit lease that was removed to under new business.
What does he say? What does he say?
We have one more item that would, the sport fit lease was moved from the consent agenda to new business. I think Councilmember Staff made that motion. Oh, Councilmember Woodhaven made that motion.
Are you ready to discuss it tonight?
Yes.
No, they tried to, but they realized they hadn't finished.
To the extent, is staff prepared to speak this evening, or would you prefer to have it on the next agenda?
We're prepared to discuss it this evening.
Okay, let's discuss it. You're prepared this evening, sir?
Yes.
Okay, let's can you give a quick summary of the situation before us, please?
Certainly. The city has had a lease with...
Could you speak up a little, please?
Certainly. The city's had a lease with Bowie Racket and Fitness Club since early 1990s. Early in the early 2000s, Bowie Racket and Fitness actually acquired a piece of property adjacent to the sports fit facility located within White Marsh Park, which they had donated to the city and then subsequently leased back, and we had modified the lease arrangement associated with that. The plans that they had for the utilization of what was known as the Williams Plains property did not materialize, and so we're looking forward to the future use of that building, of the Williams Plains building. So what's before you is a lease modification that would remove the Williams Plains building from the current lease arrangement, which would afford the city an opportunity to find another third-party user that would actually be able to utilize that building and that facility, and also accommodate Sport Fit for their summer camp programs to continue on the operations that they've been successfully running for many years.
Thank you. The concern I had, and the reason why I pulled it off the consent agenda, is that in the last session that we had some conversations about this property and the lease arrangements. One of the things we talked about was when we have another opportunity to engage in discussions with the leaseholder to talk to them about what they could do to enhance our offering to our constituents for aquatic services, specifically, or I should say, in particular, for senior citizens. We have had, over the course of time, an assortment of requests ranging from let's build an entire new aquatic center to the tune of $25 million, $30 million, to can you do something to put a bubble over a pool, one of the community pools. Also that we have services available for our citizens during the off season, if you will. And what I'd like us to be able to do is to take a look at this conversation that we're having right now with SportFit and have our recreation committee perhaps engaged with them as well to go and have a conversation about what amenities could be made available, particularly for senior citizens, for our residents at a discounted rate or through some other method, either through the senior center or what have you. I know there have been some discussions, or I know we had some discounted services that were unrelated to the lease, as I think we had until I think March or April of this year. We had an arrangement with a discount up at SportFit for some senior programs, a couple of senior classes. I understand that's moved to the LA Fitness environment as well, but it's not the same thing as having some sort of a broader program available, some broader access for seniors to that facilities, to those facilities. So I'd like to be able to pursue that, and I'd like to ask if staff could work with our advisory committee and with SportFit to see if there isn't something that would be amenable to all parties to broaden those services, particularly for our seniors.
Okay. Yeah, as you had mentioned, outside of the lease arrangement, the city's senior services had worked with SportFit on an arrangement which you had mentioned has since been moved over, and our senior center is working with LA Fitness. And we do have this evening Mr. Pete Spola representing SportFit. He is actually available and can speak a little bit to the utilization of their aquatic facilities and how they're being utilized today and the programming associated with sort of senior programming that currently exists at the facility.
Okay. I think that I appreciate your coming forward. I'm not sure that it's frankly needed at this time. I really think that what we ought to be doing is having the Recreation Committee and staff work out what the possibilities are. I don't think that us guessing back and forth and, not really in this forum able to have a proper discussion and a dialogue as to what's truly needed in the community, as well as what they may be able to provide. Certainly, I don't think we'd be able to solve that tonight. Is that something that, from the sense of the council, if we remand this to staff and to advisory committee to get together and work on this project and then come back to us with a recommendation?
That sounds like a good idea, but I think since the gentleman is here, if you'd like to come forward and just give us a brief overview, I think since you've taken the time to come, I think we'll extend that courtesy.
Thanks for having me, Council and Mayor. Sure. Like I said, we've been in business for about 30. We've been in business for about 30 years over there at SportFit, and we do offer a lot of senior sitting programs in the aquatic center. We have everything from swim lessons for kids, for seniors. We have senior aquatic programs. We have therapy programs. Pool stays busy pretty much all day long.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I get nothing but positive compliments from constituents and otherwise on the services you offer. I think you guys do a great job with that, and I think that in and of itself lends itself as a good opportunity to try and work something out as we move forward on this.
Okay, we'd be more than welcome to do that.
Thank you so very much for coming this evening.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Is there a sense of the council?
You want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that we remand this to staff and to our advisory committees for consideration of alternatives, please.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Any discussion? Vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to move to adjournment and move to closed session. Statutory authority to close session, state government, article subsection 3-305B7, to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice.
Second. Moved and properly second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Done.